Hello everyone, this is Ali. Welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about a brand new, actually really brand new NuGet package. As you just know, there was a great package called Mediator, MediatR, however you call it. You know how Mediator works. It's basically man in the middle. You have just two different systems that you don't want both them have a dependency each other. You put something in the middle and then let them talk to each other. And you also know that Mediator was free for a while, and then the owner of that library decided to make some money on that. Naturally, I see why he does that, but also that brings us to new libraries. So all the developers like me, which I've been using Mediator for many years, I can say, I was looking for a new library instead of that one. There's another one that uses source generator. It's Mediator with O and R. But I believe there are a few but I just wanted to be able to create something new for me. It's because I've seen some couple of issues with MediatR library. First of all, it was using reflection, which is not great when you have runtime limits, maybe hardware and all the other stuff. It just makes it slow. And the other stuff was that you always have to create models that is inherited from, that implements an interface like iRequest handler, iNotification, or pipeline handler or something. So that there are multiple objects that you will have to create at some point. So to be able to fix this, I said, okay, first of all, I should be able to create something new. And this new package, the new library should also give you ability to use whatever you used to use with Mediator, but also this should be fixing some problems like creating other stuff and a reflection. Plus, this should be more extensible. So if we need additional libraries on top of that, additional features, what we will call modules, we should be able to extend it. And again, this should basically use source generator to have to overcome the performance issues, but also should be extensible. So I have now introduced a new NuGet package. I call it Space. And it is basically what I need. It is pretty new. I'm still working on that. If you check the GitHub repositories, I've just, for example, the new release just 3 hours ago, and it was a major changes, to be honest. So I'm still working on that. So I'm going to ask you to contribute to it. It's because it's going to be a perfect library, I would say. It uses source generator to register everything, but also it uses the great stuff like object pooling and all the other minimal optimization, micro optimization to achieve the performance. But that is only just half. It's because we will still be able to improve its performance by adding more source generated code. It is basically using the minimal of source generator and using the other stuff behind the scene right now. But it has the ability, it has the opportunity to be expanded and get really fasted. Even though the current example of that kills Mediator, as in the performance, MediatR, and also it is almost as efficient on the memory base, as efficient as Mediator, the one that uses the source generator. Plus, this is not strongly typed, so you wouldn't have to create multiple interfaces, multiple objects. I'm going to show you how we can use that. So in that library, NuGet package, where you can see there are also issues. As I just said, it is pretty new. It's brand new. I'm still testing. And when I tested, I saw maybe some bugs and areas where we can improve and we can have some enhancement. For example, you can basically create that too. You can just fork the project and work on that. But also it is extensible. So for example, I'll call it modules. And in here, for example, we have in-memory cache module. We can add that memory cache into our example, and it's going to work like a charm. First of all, if you want to use this one, you are going to have to implement the space dependency injection, and it's going to bring abstractions with that. But I also additionally add in-memory cache because I'm going to show you how it works. In our example today, I tried to create a few endpoints that where we can test all the features, almost all the features of space. After you add the NuGet packages, you will have to call these two to be for space to be able to inject whatever it needs. Apart from that, let me show you what domains we have. So we have user domain and then to-do domain. So for users, we have endpoints. Let me show the endpoints for you first. So I'm using minimal API. I've got that group. I call it users. And when we need to create a user, let me get rid of that. When we need to create a user, we accept create user request parameter from users and also accept cancellation token. It is not required, but our send function accept that cancellation token. I just wanted to show it to you. And also from services, you will need to inject iSpace. From now on, the rest basically is so similar whatever you have done with Mediator. Again, it requires a request and response. It returns response. In Mediator, if you don't have a request or response, so you can't just pass something else. In my case, it is still the same today, but I'm going to change it. So for example, if your function, your endpoint returns nothing, you would still have to have a response type for it, and I'm calling it nothing. So in that case, for example, so user just sends create user request and we accept that and then just create it and then return created. And when user tries to log in, it sends user login request, but this time it returns user login response as we said over here. We can still say, okay, this is my send type and this is my response type. It's because we don't have any dependency, any relation between these two, so we might have to just send them implicitly. It's because in Mediator, if you remember, if this is the response for this request, you would have to create iRequest and mark this as a response or something. We don't need that one. So you would have something like that. So you basically create a relation between request and response. You can still do that in my case, so you can still use it. You can just say, okay, oops, I'm going to add a request and I'm going to create a relation between request and response. You can still do that. In that case, you wouldn't have to send anything like that, but it also, oops. In that case, it would know what it returns back as just user login response. In that case, for example, we send user login response, and if it is null, return bad request, and if it is not, return the detail, so user's login response. In get users, this time we have no request. It's because I don't have any parameter to pass. I'm just going to return a list of user details from that, but I'm still sending nothing, and its value basically returns nothing. And if it is 0, just no content, we couldn't find anything. If it's not, return the whole object. In handlers, in user handlers, where the actual handlers are, so you wouldn't have to create different handlers for anyone. So we can have a user handler class, for example, and I can put all the functions, all the methods I need in that one. When this is created, I create a new list for just simulating an in-memory database, but it can be a real database. Maybe you can just get it from a user service or something. This is not today's topic. I say, okay, I have a create user. So how it works, if you have a request type and a return type, right? If you mark any function with handle attributes, it is going to listen, request, create user request. If anyone calls send send function with that request, and if this is the response type, this is going to catch it and handle it. So the context over here has a few parameters like request, cancellation token, for example. It's got request itself, it's got service provider, it's got space itself, so you can use. So for example, using the cancellation token, space itself does the similar check, but I just wanted to show it to you. When we try to create a user, we just add it into our list over there with username and password. And it is the same for login. For example, if anyone sends this one to space, it is, and if this is the response type for it, and this one will be hit. And then in here, for example, we say, okay, get the So we are trying to create a login, so it should be created first. So check if user is created, and if so, if not, return default. If so, then say okay, it is returned, and this is the response that I'm returning back. It is the same for get user details, but with one slight difference. In here, again, I have nothing context this time. It's because the request type is nothing, and this is my response type. But I added cache module. So when you have a cache module, so the attribute you use is cache module in that case. And remember, we add in-memory cache, so we don't need to add any implementation for that cache. I just need to add this one, and it should be caching that response that returns from here for 10 seconds only. Remember, we are going to test this one. But again, my handle function, and my handle function has a cache module. So whenever I call this one, after the first call, it is going to be cached thanks to the cache module. In here, I basically do just 2 seconds delay to be able to show you how cache works and then return results. I'm not going to get into detail for this one. So let me test this one. Actually, it is pretty simple. So after I create the user, if you see, after creating the user, I should be able to call get user details, right? So let me open up that HTTP file for logging and show you. So when I hit create user, whatever we have is 201. But when I call, normally if I call this one, for example, I should be able to list whatever I've created, right? So now I'm hitting it and it returns, it waits for 2 seconds, and then it returns 204. But you can say, wait, we just created something, right? So let me do it again. So create user. It says created, and now I'm calling it again, waiting 2 seconds because it's expired already, 204. So let me show you something. I have a class, I call it user handlers. That user handlers is created by space itself. So I've never created this one, right? So in my endpoints, for example, I injected iSpace and I just called this one, send. I don't know who creates user handler and how created them. In that case, I can assume when I call the create user, it's maybe created this one as a new and then added into this one. But when I call the get function, get user details, it created that again. So I can assume it is either injected as a scoped, it is injected as scoped or transient. So there's something wrong. Maybe it should be, it's because I'm using this one, maybe it should be singleton, right? So in that case, I can go to space and say, okay, I have an option here with service lifetime and I can mark it singleton. So from now on, the user handler will be injected as singleton. So I can use any other dependency resolving issue things. So let me now test it again. So this time we should be able to see whatever we need to see. So go login and call create user first and says created and call it first. Wait 2 seconds and it will this time return the result. Username, password, and we have last login and it is null. So let me call the login function. I just logged in and it says, okay, this is the generated token, whatever you like. And now I list it again. So wait 2 seconds. I'm going to call it again. So this time, if you see, it is 1 millisecond. As it is, we are still on 10 seconds. Let me call it again, 1 millisecond again. Wait for a few seconds and hit it again. Now again, 2 seconds. So the cache works, I can say. But last login is not. It doesn't work. So let me show you some other functionality we have in here. So it's because I've never updated it. So I can say when handle login works, I can do all the logics here. I can update the last login. But also we have notification feature in space. So as we have in Mediator. So when anyone publish a request from I user logged in, and I can do all the updates thing, as you can just see, find the user and updates its last login. But someone needs to publish that one. So if I come there and say, I already know user is not null, and I can basically check if response is not null. I just want to return, I just want to publish, let's say await and context space published this time. And now I am creating this one by reading response dot username. And as we use await, let's make it async. And as this is async, we can directly return this one. So now I say, okay, when login happens, I just send that one. So whatever they do, I don't care. I'm not updating the last login or something. Maybe you have multiple notifications, which you can, but I don't care. So you can have actually multiple notifications. If you have multiple notifications, how would you like them to be called, in parallel or in sequential? So you can configure that too. So in here, so notification dispatch time, you can say notification dispatch time sequential, or you can say in parallel. So basically creates multiple thread, call your notifications, wait for all them to be completed, and then goes on. Or sequential, you might just say. But in our case, we have only one. So now, after logging in successfully, I'm now publishing a notification, and this will be handling it. It's because it's got notification context with this event, and it doesn't have any response type. So this is how notification works in here. But if you go to, for example, in our docs files, and you can find all the details here too, how we can use it, how notification works, for example, how handlers work. And if you go to notifications section here, in docs here, so you can basically see how it works, what configurations you have, parallel or sequential or something. Everything you need is in that GitHub repository. So let me test this again and see if last logging works. So go logging and come here, create user 401, 201, and we call it. So in 2 seconds, it is. So I call it again. So I now logged in. I'm gonna call it again. As you see, okay, we have await response and with last login. So as you see, last login works. Just before, well, like 2 seconds or 5 seconds ago, when I hit that one, it returns the cached value. But remember, we've cached it, and then we've updated the cached value in that case. It is not separate from here. That's why we didn't hit that function, but we've returned the same object. That's why last login was filled, even though we didn't hit that endpoint, hit that method. Okay, this is how user handler and endpoints works. So far we've seen handler and the notification. In our other domain, which is to-do handler, so I'm going to show you what we can do with to-dos. It's again using the minimal API, and this is the group. And so we can create a to-do, or we can get to-dos. This time we are not going to have a cache, but we will have something else. So in here I say create to-do request. It does the same thing, but this time I have a try catch block over here. If anything happens here, if someone throws argument exception, for example, I will return bad request. I'm sending this one, and I'm returning nothing basically, but I will have to send this one. I'm sending this request for create to do. For the get to dos, basically I'm again sending nothing but expecting list to do details, and do the same thing, no content or type to dos. In here, in handlers this time, I have create to do. It's basically is doing the same, except this one, and does a similar thing for this one. As we've injected this one as singleton, we can still use in memory one. And this time I'm injecting iLogger in my handlers. And this is the create one. It is easy. When creating, I will have a pipeline. So pipelines are basically middlewares in Mediator or Space. Now we are talking about Space. Let's talk about Space. So pipelines are basically middlewares that comes into the play just before your handle functions is hit, right? So for example, for create to do, I have 2 different pipelines, 2 different middlewares, and I have orders for them. So for example is logging. I'm using logger. So as it is pipeline, it's got its own method signature like this one. So we have context with pipeline context, and we have pipeline delegate, and this is basically request response, holding the request response. So before hitting the next step, I don't care, as a middleware, I don't care what the next step is. I'm just calling it. Before I'm hitting it, I'm saying, okay, this is the log I'm generating, creating to do with title. And then this is after. So to do is created, basically. It returns nothing then. But I have a try catch below. So whatever I have here will be logged too. So as the order for that pipeline is 1, and remember, this is the same thing. So create to do request for that handler. So in that case, I know if the request type and response type is the same, if I use pipeline, it is going to be a pipeline for the handler for that function, right? So I have that request and pipeline context with that request. So I'm basically logging it. So I'm calling the next one. So as this was the first, and the next one will be the second, in this case, this one, and it is validate to do. What does it do? It's basically check if the title is empty string or not, or null or not. If it is null, for example, it doesn't call the next one. So it doesn't actually calls the handle function. It says, okay, throw an exception with argument exception, which will be again caught by that catch, for example, for the first time, and will be logged and then return so someone else can throw. So you know how throw and throwx works if you've seen my previous video. So basically, to-do logging will be logging if we have any validation error or something. So basically, I've created my own validation logic for that create to-do request by just adding this one and doing all the validations here. If it works, just call the next one. If not, just do whatever you like. So in that case, create to-do is a function, but we have 2 pipelines for it. And then we have to do get to-dos. Again, it basically returns the same stuff. So let me test this one this time. So I'm going to show you the console this time. So let me go to the HTTP. Okay, the first one is I'm creating to do with valid value, so buy milk. So now I'm hitting it. So it says 201, it is created. So if you remember, we don't use cache. So when I call this one, it is going to return whatever I have. So type buy milk and then is completed as false. If I hit this one this time, and let me show the console actually. So I have logger factory class over there, category name, and the logger is creating to do with title buy milk. And this is the afterward, if you remember, to do created with title with milk. So now I hit this one. So what we are going to have is for bad requests, and this is the title cannot be null. This is from my validation, but let me show you what we have in console. So it says, okay, creating to do with title, it is the logging and the title as empty. And on the next one, it is going to log it as fail. It's because it caught the exception is handled. And it says error occurred when creating to do. And this is the error. So title cannot be empty. And if you see, there is nothing else. So we didn't see, for example, the other one. We didn't see this one. It's because this one thrown an exception and we catch it over there and then do whatever we like. So as you see, both titles and both pipelines worked for this one. This is actually almost it. But I'm going to show you something else. Let's say we have multiple handles for the same type of, let's say, create to do too. So we can technically have multiple handlers. In that case, when create to do requests sent, there will be 2 handlers, but by default, space will be calling the later one in your source file. So this is the first one and this is the second one. So it will be calling this one. Let's imagine you're doing some calculation, maybe price calculation or something, and you have 2 different versions of that one. And if something happens, for example, your function behaves differently. In to do, let's say if the title is something, you're basically adding something else, maybe calling another HTTP function or something else. You're doing differently. But your request type and the response type is the same. So you may have 2 different handlers for that one. If you have this case, so you can customize your handlers. So by saying my name is create to do, for example, And you can say, I am create to do to. Create to do to. So basically, I have two different versions of the same request response. I have two different versions of the same handler. But again, if you don't specify which one you are calling, it will be calling this one, so the later one. But you can actually specify, let's say, create to do over there. The second parameter is, as you see, is name. So you can say create to do. And in that case, it is deliberately going to call the create to do handlers, even though you have multiple ones. Maybe you have different handlers, endpoints, or maybe you have some, I don't know, request, check if request title is this, call to do. Maybe if it is something like that, call to do to, whatever you have. So whatever your logic you have. But space actually itself allows you to have the same request, same handler, and give them a name and then call them. But when you have multiple handlers, it basically confuses pipelines. It's because technically the pipelines will be hit, will be called for both, but also you can specify the handler type. For example, you can say only, I am a pipeline for create to do only. It is not going to be running when you deliberately call this one. So you can create different handlers with the name, and you can specify the pipeline for only that handler, even though it is the same. It is using the same request response type. So it gives you ability to be able to use use them differently. We don't have streaming right now in space, but it is in feature plan. And if you come over here and, for example, see issues, there are still some issues. There are still some bugs over here. As I just said, it is brand new. I'm still working on that one, but you can contribute. So you can basically try that library. Maybe you will find a bug. Maybe you will fix it later, and then maybe you will just open an issue. Maybe you will let me know in this under this comment of this video. Maybe you're going to give me a feedback. Maybe you're going to fork the repo and work on that. But I believe this is going to be a library that where many people use it. And I believe we are going to love it, and you're going to love it. As in benchmarks too, it is almost as fast as Mediator, the one that uses this source generator. It is killing the MediatR already. It's because it is not using reflection or something. It is killing it. It's roasting it maybe. But Mediator, the one with O, is using this source generator already. It is pretty fast. But I am at some stage, I'm killing it too. And there is still room for improvements for this one. It's because it is using the source generator partially, and then uses lots of registration and use them wisely. There's lots of micro optimization in this application. It is super fast, but it still has room to become even faster. And probably, basically, I'm asking for your help. Use it. Give me a feedback, maybe work on that, be a contributor for that one. This is basically everything I just need to mention, I guess. But yeah, as I just said, there are feature plans, there are still bugs, there are still room for improvement. But if you have any question regarding this space library or the other modules, for example, if you go to check in-memory space, in-memory cache, you can create your own modules. It doesn't have to be memory cache, but let's say it is a cache. You can basically implement your own Redis cache and have a different NuGet package. It is super easy. There are documentation how you can do that. And maybe you will add auditing module. So there will be many modules. Maybe you're going to add validation modules. You're going to be adding logging modules. You're going to be adding any other modules that you might just remember. And this is basically it. But if you like my video, if you like my content, please hit the like button. If you have any question, if you have any feedback, please let me know in the comment section below. And this is it from now. So until the next video, happy coding.